Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this September 28th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Listen to my show every evening, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's Pacific time. They also play the show at 11 a.m. And if you can't get it there, go to my long-standing website at arcticbeacon.com, and you can get shows going back over a decade regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order. Today my guest is attorney John Levy. John's an international attorney, and also he's a faculty member at Southern New Hampshire University, and dealing in political science. And I wanted to kind of change gears. If you follow my show over the last 10 years, John and I have always talked about some of the amazing cases that he's been involved with internationally regarding the Vatican. Kind of wanted to shift gears today with John and talk about the presidential elections, a lot what's going on in Syria, in Russia, and to get his view on a lot of these stories. We can't ignore them. I mean, we're 41 days out from a new president. John, in the past, has even said that there's a possibility, a 50-50 chance there won't even be an election. So, John, why don't we start off right there? When you said that, what could happen that would suspend this election?
Yeah, there's a lot of worry, Greg, and I say that as a political scientist. I have a PhD in political science on the faculty at Southern New Hampshire University, and we look at, as political scientists, we try to look at things neutrally and objectively. And you take a look at a thesis, a question like, could the election be canceled? Because that's come up. That's come up even in the mainstream media a while back. They were speculating, well, what if Hillary drops dead, or what if Trump withdraws? I mean, those are very...
What's that, Jim?
Those are very strange questions for the media to be bringing up. So, what are we supposed to make of that? What it tells me as a political scientist is that those are real questions that are out there. Is the election going to take place? There's a good possibility that under the Constitution, the election could certainly be suspended or delayed. That would certainly be constitutional, and that could be done by the executive or the legislative branch, which is the Congress.
Well, let's say that Clinton's health holds up and Trump, he's not going to drop out. What other factors could take place then?
Well, many factors. Let's just think about it. What if there was a terrorist attack, God forbid, another big terrorist attack or a string of attacks, much like the ones we're seeing now at the shopping malls, right? Shootings, stabbings, and multiply that times 10, the president could step in and say, whoops, things are a little unstable now for national security reasons. We need to delay the election. And he certainly could do that. No argument there. So there's one scenario right there. Another one that looks like they're trying to get some traction for in the media is they could claim, Russian hackers have compromised the electoral system in several states, and until we sort that out, we can't have an election because the results would be in question. So that's another little trial balloon they put out there. In fact, Donald Trump, when asked about Russian hacking at the debate the other day, said, what Russian hacking? Show me the proof. And of course, they don't have any. But again, who's to say that Obama's Department of Justice or Homeland Security Department suddenly, the week before the election, comes up with quote-unquote some proof?
Right, okay, we can't have an election because I get your point. Here's something kind of speculative, but I've been thinking in these terms. Knowing that Trump was selected to do this, he's got a reputation of always winning. I don't think he would take this opportunity or agree to be a nominee unless he was either going to win or there was going to be no election. I don't think he wants to go out as a loser. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely correct. Trump is, from the start, his whole persona, if you look at it from a psychological analysis, he's a winner. And he doesn't do things halfway. He goes in only because he thinks he's going to win. So you're absolutely spot on that analysis. So Trump is in it to win, no question.
And the point I'm trying to make is that he doesn't need to do this. He's got billions of dollars. And secondly, there's got to be something we don't know, because, Clinton to me, and this goes right into the FBI investigation on her emails, I've never seen anything like it, John, from a legal standpoint. I want to get your view on this. We know what this email controversy is all about. It's been plastered on the news for months, and all I see is a smelly situation from the get-go with the FBI. I think, I was listening today again. They're talking about all the immunity granted to all of the players next to Clinton, which is absurd. And when you go even back to that tarmac meeting between Clinton and our Justice Department head, we see a fix in the make here. Your thoughts on that? Because it doesn't make sense to me. He laid out a perfect case to indict her. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I got one word for that. Petraeus, General Petraeus. He actually pled guilty to a misdemeanor, which was allowing a classified document, not thousands of classified documents like Clinton, but a classified document fall into the hands of his girlfriend, and alleged girlfriend, I should say, because we don't know what the truth of that story was really.
Mm-hmm.
And he hauled him into court, and Petraeus pled guilty to a misdemeanor. So Hillary, of course, has violated the same law. There's a law on the books. The federal law says you cannot, allow classified information to fall into the wrong hands or simply distribute it to the public because it's classified. And, of course, that is what she did by using the private server. She got hacked, and that information is out there, all those 33,000 missing emails or deleted emails and other things. She's guilty. Guilty is charged. However, here's the problem from a legal point of view. You can commit a crime and go scot-free because the prosecution decides, which is Department of Justice in this case, Lynch,
mm-hmm.
who met with Bill Clinton a few days before she announced she wasn't going to prosecute, decides not to prosecute. You can commit a murder and go completely free if the prosecutor isn't going to bring the charges. So that's the problem. Department of Justice, not the FBI. The FBI investigates. Department of Justice is the one who makes the final decision, or a grand jury, which was not convened in this case either. Now, I'm sure you remember back to the Reagan administration, elsewhere, they were convening grand juries right and left.
Yeah, special prosecutors, the whole works. Now it seems like we're acting like a third world banana republic, in a sense.
Well, the fix was in. Now, of course, is that legal? I suppose it is. The Department of Justice doesn't have to, and they don't. A lot of times they don't prosecute every crime for reasons of expediency or reasons that they don't want to waste the resources on it, or, as in this case, for obviously political reasons. Now,
well, here's one of the most interesting points of the case. She was under a congressional subpoena to turn over all her work-related emails. And between that time, she destroyed these 33,000 emails. And there's evidence, even to the fact when where she went to in Colorado, Platte River Technical Group or whatever, to have them bleached out. It was obvious that she was obstructing justice here. Congress has said time and time again in front of with all these meetings, how come the FBI, why didn't the Justice Department even look into this? So to me, they're like slapping the face of shoving it in the face of the American people in the Congress and saying, look, you don't have any power over the executive branch anymore. And what's your thoughts on that? I mean, there's a perfect example of obstruction.
There is. It's obstruction, of course, of Congress. However, we live in a system where there's a separation of powers, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
the judicial branch, the congressional legislative branch, and the executive branch, which is the presidency. And we have checks and balances. And Congress, of course, has been holding its punches. They don't do what they say one thing, and then they do something else. So if Congress feels that strongly about it, Congress has remedies available. They can file an impeachment against the Attorney General. They can try to remove the head of the FBI or Homeland Security. There's all sorts of things Congress can do, but chooses not to.
So they're playing political games as well, perhaps, huh?
Absolutely. The Republicans in Congress are part of the problem. I mean, that's notice a lot of them are not in line behind Trump. And the reason is they've been playing a little game with the Democrats and the electorate. They say whatever to get elected. Then they get in there and they make a bunch of noise when something comes up for a vote. But suddenly it's all passed. There's some compromise bill, or they've had their say and the bill goes away and the Obama legislative agenda gets through. I mean, let's face it, Republicans have controlled Congress here since the second year of the Obama administration, and nonetheless, they can't seem to impede or block much of anything.
Right. I gotcha.
So I lay the blame equally at Congress. The fix is in. This is why there is such fear of Trump getting elected, because they can't control the man, and I say that in a good way. But that little game would probably stop. Trump would probably not play along with it.
Right. Let's stay on domestic affairs here, because in the second half hour I want to get into some foreign affairs. But let's talk about this debate that took place, the first presidential debate where over 80 million people watched it, set a record. People are extremely interested in what's going on, and this is a big change in American politics. What's your take on that debate, as both candidates came away saying they won?
Right. Well, I would say that Clinton won from the standpoint of the format of the debate, which was simply a showcase for her to show how good she looks. And they served up a bunch of questions that all happened, I guess, by coincidence to coincide with her agenda. I didn't see any questions about Libya or email servers or anything like, or Syria or anything like that would have reflected poorly on Clinton. I saw questions that were just served up like a slow-pitch softball, all tailored to Clinton. On the other hand, we saw questions to Trump that were guaranteed to cheese him off, like questions about his taxes. A ridiculous question about Rosie O'Donnell, right? I mean, that's been put to bed for months. Why would that be of importance to the electorate? I think Trump did fine. I don't think he lost, but I do think the format certainly favored Clinton because it was able to show her in a good light.
Yeah, and exactly. And Trump basically, then they hit him on the birther issue, which, one of the things which I don't think is important. I was looking at the polling. They do polls and everything. His tax issue, considered to be only 6% of the American people think that's important, but Lester Holt seemed to think that was very important. I don't think it was Lester. I think it was NBC who told him what to say. What do you think?
Yeah, well, as I said, I think the format was set. Also, a good point about the birther issue. Trump had pretty much put that to bed. How is that even an issue in this election? Obama is not running for president. So why would anyone care? What Trump has said is a matter of public record. So why would you belabor the point, use up important time that should be spent on other issues on something like that that's a non-issue? It simply was put there so Clinton could appeal to her constituencies.
And there's one thing about Trump that interests me, is I think look, when he was asked those questions, I think it was quite obvious that he's not really familiar with how to debate these issues, how to maybe get rid of that question in 10 seconds and then spin it off on her like every politician does. I don't know whether they've given him the advice, or is he just such a novice at this that you're seeing him play it as if he was in a business room instead of in a presidential debate where you're taught. I think me or you could have got up there, not to say we're smarter than Trump, but we understand when you're asked a question like on your taxes, you say, listen, I've said that many times when my attorney allows me to do it. Now, what about her? What's Clinton? What are you hiding, Miss Clinton? That's how he should have handled it. Your thoughts?
Well, sure. In hindsight, of course, not being under the lights and the pressure there, we all could have said, well, why didn't he bring up the Clinton Foundation or something like that when they asked him about his taxes, right?
Right.
But, Trump's not a professional politician. That's his appeal. That's why he's running neck and neck with Clinton, because he's not like that. And the expectation, therefore, for Trump is different than the expectation for a polished pro like Clinton. So I think it was evident to most people that he's simply speaking as a normal businessman, citizen who's running for president, and you're not going to get that polished style out of him. So I don't think it reflects poorly on him. I think as the debates go along, we'll see him start to get a little bit more savvy as to the process, though. We know he's a quick study.
Yeah, I know. And I think it's going to be real interesting. I don't think really, if these elections do take place, I don't really think the polls are going to reflect the true vote count, because look what happened in England with Brexit. Everybody, the day before that election, the polls were all saying Brexit had no choice. They were 10, 15 points behind, and they won.
Right. Well, I can tell you a little thing about public choice polling in the U.S. because I've worked on it. We study it all the time in political science. It is supposedly scientific. However, in all scientific studies, your results are only as good as the data that goes into the system. That's the problem. You can run all the statistical analysis that you want, but if your data is flawed, your results are going to be skewed. And that's the problem with polling these days, in that large constituencies are underrepresented in the polls because they don't have landlines. Think of all the people that don't have landlines. How would they poll them? Well, you can't. That's difficult. And then also that then means other groups, such as people age 50 or older that have landlines, are overpolled. So that's why you see Clinton, who does well with certain demographics over age 50, particularly women, showing up much better than Trump. So I think the polls are these days are not as accurate as they used to be, and that partially is caused by people relying more on cell phones and fewer and fewer people
online as well. I mean, it's not the same anymore. Let's look at this aspect of it. All the money these people are, our presidential candidates are collecting millions and millions of dollars, and look at all the money Clinton has spent on basically ads trying to, emphasize that Trump is called a candidate she was Miss Universe, Miss Piggy, and she's relying on all these scurrilous advertisements, spending millions where he's spending nothing, and he's head-to-head with her. It's showing me that television isn't what it used to be, right?
I don't even watch TV, so I haven't even seen these ads unless they show up on YouTube or somewhere. A lot of people have cut the cord on TV and, depend on other forms of media. So I agree. Her media buys are so last century that she's probably just throwing money out the window. And Trump's conserving his money. He's probably going to use it in a last-minute viral push of some sort, and it'll probably work out to his benefit.
Right. And secondly, when you looked at this debate, and one of the interesting things about it is I always have tried to look at it, politics, from a real third-party point of view because I was a journalist, but I could not help myself in this election. And it's very interesting because I think I'm like everybody else now. I'm tired of globalism. I'm tired of Clinton's lies. I'm tired of not talking about the truth. Now, from my perspective, there's a lot not being said in this election, and we're not going to go there because you can catch all my other shows because we're not seeing any connection to the Vatican or Gladio or the real truth behind drug running in this country. But what we're seeing with Trump is at least an attempt to outline the issues to help us as people, so I can't help but root for him. And I think that's what's really happening in this country. You're seeing more people saying, hey, I'm not a globalist here, I'm for America. And so you're seeing a lot more of that. So the polling comes out. Look, I don't think anybody in that debate changed the minds of people. And whether the independents are going to go one or other, I think will be determined at the end of the election. But here's the interesting thing. All the online polls saw Trump winning. Then you get these so-called, what you were saying, scientific poll, or the pundits were all saying that Clinton won. The pundits were completely on the side of Clinton, and we have all these people online going, no, our man won. Trump won. And he was knocking her off 80% to 20. What's your thoughts on that? I think online is where it's at today. What do you think?
Yeah, that's correct. On the online polls, Trump, used an expression there, he kicked her butt.
Mm-hmm.
And You go to the more quote-unquote scientific traditional polls, no, it shows a slight advantage Clinton. The pundits, as you say, so-called experts, mostly went for Clinton because she's more polished. And what you get there is probably a misrepresentation. Yes, she probably did well with women over age 50 who answered those surveys. But with the rest of the electorate, I think she did probably poorly. She didn't change any minds. And about all she did was hang in there by showing that she's able to stand up for 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing. You got to go in there and look healthy, you know. Then, here's an interesting thing. I don't know if you caught this quote from Howard Dean. We all know who that guy is.
Right.
Howard Dean said about Trump, well, he was sniffling a bit in the beginning of the debate. Maybe he had a little allergy or whatever. Howard Dean said he emphasized that it could be that he's on coke. I mean, this guy has taken more flack from the Dem. I've never seen anything like it. And the one thing I think, it's not resonating. I think people are starting to see the truth behind really what's going on. And all of these things, I think, benefit Trump in the end.
Sure, but those are just the usual dirty tricks we've seen in other campaigns. I mean, you remember the rumor the Democrats floated about Reagan's hair color had poisoned his brain.
Okay.
I remember that one. And certainly, John Kerry and the Swift voting incident. I mean, that was another thing. Even Clinton bringing up Clinton, of course, according to Trump, is the one who originated the birther movement. Which, having worked on that with some of the attorneys involved, I would have to say the original lawsuit filed was by a fellow who was associated with the Democratic Party.
Exactly.
It's not Republicans who started the birther lawsuits. It was done by a fellow who had previously been involved with the 9/11 Truther movement, but who was a registered Democrat.
Yeah, and to me, that question shouldn't even been asked. But then again, we know what the moderator was all about. And I think Trump survived it quite well. I think he'll rebound, and I think there'll be some questions. And if not, he's learned one lesson. He better bring up Libya. He better bring up Syria. He better bring up these things she's done. But we got about 2 minutes on domestic policy here I want to talk about before we shift over to some things going on in those parts of the world, which you have a lot of information about. So we're getting down to 40 days here. I'm looking, and maybe we could do this segue, looking at ways this election won't come to being. Because like I said, there's strange things going on in Syria. There's strange things going on between the relations between Russia and the United States, things that aren't being reported here that are reported in places like Israeli news, which I want to get to in the second half hour. We got about 30 seconds here. But just to lead into that, do you think there could be some kind of foreign conflict that could suspend this election prior to November 8th?
Yeah, I think there's a significant possibility, around 10%, that the elections will be postponed or suspended. Whether that's due to national security domestically or an international incident or something else, I'm not sure, but I would quantify it at around 10% chance, which is pretty high.
All right, yeah. I mean, yeah, it is when you're looking at this, and we're not even getting into voter fraud, which is a whole subject in itself. So let's take a break here. My guest is John Levy, an international attorney, talking about the elections. We'll be back in 3 minutes on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, welcome back to the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this September 28th, 2016 day on our calendar. My guest is international attorney and faculty member of Southern New Hampshire University, John Levy, talking politics domestically in the first half hour. We're going to shift over and move into the foreign area. And, John, let's look at this from a real practical point of view. It seems like every day there's another attack somewhere. Somebody's knifing somebody here or bombing somebody there. The FBI director today, when he was testifying regarding the Clinton emails, had mentioned in his opening statement, I believe, that there's going to be a huge increase in terrorist activities within the next 2 to 5 years, and there's really not much we can do about it under the present condition. Like you said at the break, that seems to be a change in what they've been saying earlier. What's going on here? Is that setting us up for defeat even before we have a chance to fight back?
Oh, absolutely. I used to instruct in counterterrorism at the university, and a lot of our students were in the military, actually. And the mantra for years during the Bush administration and during most of the Obama administration, at least up to the Tsarnaev brothers and the Boston Marathon bombing, was that, look, everything's working. All those trillions of dollars we've spent fighting terrorism are paying off because we haven't had any terrorism. There's been no terrorism. Then suddenly, in the last few years, you start off with the Boston Marathon bombers who were influenced from outside the country, and now just this year we've had Orlando, San Bernardino, in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and on and on. The bomber in New York, New Jersey. So suddenly, all these ISIS-influenced incidents show up, which I find very strange. I mean, where did all these holes in the security system that was so highly touted come from? Yeah,
and I mean, when we start looking at policies here, I can't think of one Obama foreign policy decision, including Hillary Clinton's decisions as Secretary of State, that bolstered us, America. It all seems to be flowing in the other direction. The money to Iran, the payments in cash, like our government's a drug dealing operation. Then we look at Libya and Benghazi. I mean, she basically was not even willing to help 4 Americans who were killed there, and if she took action, it wouldn't have happened. We were 2 hours away, but we just stood down. And then we look at the crazy Syrian thing we're doing, all these refugees flooding in here. And guess what? They're allowing it to happen. They want to increase, Hillary wants to increase it by 550% over the thousands that Obama's bringing in. I don't see anything they're doing. If I was I'm not politically correct. I think I could actually say this man is a traitor. That may be harsh, but I really think so. What's your thoughts?
Well, I would agree with Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why. Trump said, beginning with the invasion of Iraq, which he said he opposed, which is true, we've seen nothing but an increase in terrorism. So first you had the ill-advised invasion of Iraq on a false pretext of weapons of mass destruction. And what did we do? We took out Saddam Hussein, who was preventing terrorism. Then we saw an acceleration of the same trend under Obama, where Assad, who again was keeping the lid on Al-Qaeda and other jihadis, he's the enemy suddenly. And we also take out Muammar Gaddafi, who said in a speech, "Who are these people who are attacking me? They are Al-Qaeda." And of course, what does the U.S. do? We bomb. We have to go have NATO go in there and bomb the Libyan infrastructure so ISIS and Al-Qaeda can take over. In Egypt, one of the most populous countries in the Muslim world with the biggest army, what does Obama do? He supports the Islamic revolution, which takes out the legal government, puts in the Muslim Brotherhood, but for the grace of God, the military came back in there and rectified the situation, or it would have been 10 times worse. And we've had the same thing in Tunisia, where a government that was stopping Islamic extremism was taking out, quote-unquote, a Muslim Brotherhood type democratic government comes in, and we see, again, an increase in terrorism in Tunisia and lots of Tunisian foreign volunteers joining ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So everything the U.S. has done since Iraq has promoted terrorism by taking out the governments that were holding it back.
And to add injury to insult, he's weakened our military. When you look at not only ground forces, but you look at the number of ships that have been taken away, the airplanes, the jets are underperforming. We have not put money back in to protect our country. It all seems to be working together to increase terrorism, where it should be a complete opposite approach. I think you're right there. But let's move back here. Not only are they doing that by allowing all these refugees in, open borders. Trump says, no, I'm going to build a wall. We're going to stop people from coming. And he's right. Not only are they doing that, through their support of Black Lives Matter, they're weakening our own domestic police force to control this violence. And they're actually stimulating it and creating this false impression that police are against the black people, which is not true. Your thoughts on that? They're working in a two-prong approach here, I think.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The immigration system has proven to be a disaster. Again, beginning with the Boston Marathon bombers, Russian intelligence told the U.S. government the Tsarnaev brothers were potential terrorists. What does the U.S. do? Gives them refugee status. And again, all these recent incidents, San Bernardino, Orlando, New York and New Jersey, St. Cloud, Minnesota, all these incidents involve refugees, immigrants from Muslim countries. And then apparently they don't like it in the U.S. so much, or they wouldn't be attacking us. So immigration policy, complete failure, especially allowing immigrants from Muslim countries who are not properly vetted and are disloyal. I mean, they're essentially disloyal. As for the police, I think Hillary Clinton summed it up best. What did she say in the debates, Greg? She said, our police need re-education. I'm going to re-educate the police.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
That word re-education, we know where that comes from, right? Mao Zedong's China.
Exactly. I mean, I was laughing at that one. I'm saying, these police need to, what we need to do. Now, here's an interesting thing, and I don't know if you've looked at this legally, but there was some really glaring errors that Lester Holt made when he said stop and frisks. Trump is saying, look what happened in New York. Giuliani came in, he increased the amount of police presence in the neighborhoods where there were people being killed left and right, just like in Chicago, and we brought that down from 2,500 to 500. And we used stop and frisk. And then immediately Clinton and Holt, Trump was, it was like they come in with double-barrel shotguns and he's fighting with a BB gun against 2 against 1. And he says, Lester Holt, no, stop and frisk is unconstitutional. In fact, it's not unconstitutional. And there's some little legal technical thing going on here. What happened, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but I just wanted to touch on that fact. And I didn't have a real good chance to really look at that, but stop and frisk technically is not unconstitutional, correct?
That's correct. There's nothing unconstitutional about the police stopping and frisking someone. The issue that was brought up in New York and that Trump correctly identified was that a liberal judge said, but you're stopping and frisking mainly blacks and Hispanics. Therefore, you must have an evil intent to violate their civil rights. And therefore, it's not the stopping and frisking that's unconstitutional. It's the fact that you were overwhelmingly taking the guns off of Hispanics and blacks. That's unconstitutional. And then the city of New York would have appealed that to a higher court, except that de Blasio came in as mayor, and Bloomberg was out, and wasn't appealed.
Yeah, and I was listening to Giuliani talk about that today, and basically, that's the key to this thing, stop and frisk. And I think it would help in Chicago. I mean, the police have to have more control. I'm watching a city being from Chicago. I remember how it was in the 60s and 70s. And it was never this bad. I mean, you were always told if you live in Chicago and you live on the north side by Wrigley Field, you don't go to the south side. Unless you got a reason to, and there's certain places you do. I'm not talking about the whole south side of Chicago, but you don't go to certain areas. That was always ingrained in the heads of kids because of the danger there. In fact, one of my good friends who I graduated high school with, and he went on to the University of Illinois, I went on to Western Illinois. One of his brothers, younger brother named Danny Sullivan, we told this kid, well, if you ever go to a White Sox game, you go in the game and you come right home. He apparently afterwards, he was 16 years old, they decided to buy some beer, and he was shot in the back. And he's paralyzed to this day, to the waist down. Now, this was a white guy shot by a black guy. Now, it always seems to be the opposite. I mean, look, Obama, with his support of Black Lives Matter, and not all lives matter, has instigated this false sense of that police are out to kill black people. I don't think it's true. Your thoughts on that?
Well, sure. Charlotte, the most recent example, the shooter was black. The policeman who shot the black suspect was black. The chief of police was black. The mayor, until recently, was black. Let's go one level higher. The U.S. Attorney General's been black since who heads the FBI and Department of Justice has been black since the beginning of the Obama administration. The head of Homeland Security is black. So how can there be a conspiracy by law enforcement to kill black people if it's controlled by black people? Well, this is stupid. It's ridiculous. And to go back to stop and frisk, no. They can stop and frisk you anytime they want, Greg. It's just if you're black or Hispanic, then they might be violating your civil rights because they might be stopping you not because you're suspicious, but because you're black or Hispanic. That's the argument. So they're granting extra rights to people based on skin color. It is really a perversion of the Constitution.
Right, and basically, when you look at it, the reason that they probably had to go do that is because most of the crime was in those areas. Correct?
Yeah, well, exactly. But so someone's creating an agenda, and yes, police overreaction does happen. Police do negligently kill people all the time, and there's a remedy for it. There's a legal remedy for police brutality and police overreaction and police shootings. And I can tell you what it is. It's called suing them for that. The problem we have in the United States is judges, police, and prosecutors usually cannot be sued. They have immunity. So the only way you can sue them is by claiming a civil rights violation. So if the police negligently shoot your mother, which can happen, you can't sue the police. They have qualified immunity. The only way you can sue them is if you claim it was a civil rights violation. So the stupid laws, they're stupid, force people to make false civil rights claims in order to get justice.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. I wasn't thinking in those terms, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the immunity given. I was listening to Giuliani speak, and he said this. He said, "Listen, I've dealt with good cops, bad situations, good situations, and it's going to happen. But the point is, we can't allow civil unrest to take place." And the point he brought up, and what I was upset about what happened in Charlotte, was just as much as I was upset about to see how this whole thing played out, of course, a loss of life, but how there was not control over the rioters. You never allow these people to take over your streets. You put them on the sidewalk. Think about this, John. Especially what about an ambulance? Some guy is sick, and he can't get through that street because you got rioters there, and he dies in the ambulance. Isn't that important as well?
Well, that's happened, actually, in many cases, but the problem we have is if the police don't stand down, they'll get in further trouble. Remember, in Ferguson, Missouri, when the first night of the riots, the police tried to fight back, and what happened? They were accused of being, goons and racist thugs. So so the norm is more like what happened in Baltimore, where the rioters take over the streets and the police kind of stand back and watch, try to contain the fire, if you will. So rather than active policing, it becomes a matter of containment. But that unfortunately is what happens. And again, go back to Donald Trump. That's why he's promoting law and order, which presumably means if you try to riot, you'll be taken out.
Yeah, because look, okay, we all agree, we have the right to protest in this country, but it has to be peaceful, organized, and once it turns into mob rule, you're going to have way more. It opens a can of worms all over the country now. People think they don't want to hear really what happened there. You're going to have cases where an officer steps overboard. You're going to have cases where the officer acted to save his own life. But now an officer, if I was a cop right now, John, and I was working in Chicago, there is no way in hell I'd want to get out of my car if I was working in the south side of Chicago by Cabrini Green and all these other places where violence is, 9 people were shot yesterday in that city. If you're a cop, I'm telling you, I don't want to get out of the car. What's your thoughts?
Well, to tell you the truth, the norm in the past has been riots. When you think back, riots have been quite frequent in the United States. That is just what people do. One of the reasons that Obama got elected, at least the first time, and probably the second time around, was the idea was, well, if you put a black man in the office of the presidency, that might constrain African Americans from rioting, because that is a problem in the African American community that they like to riot. But I don't want to say they like riot, but some elements of the African American community dabble in riots from time to time. Now, until recently, Obama was probably doing his job keeping a lid on it. We didn't see a lot of riots his first 4 years in office. Now, suddenly, as he's going out, we can see the true agenda of racial division starting to peep back out again. And unfortunately, the blame lies with Obama, who could probably put a lid on it if he wanted to, but apparently for political gain, they don't want to.
Yeah, I mean it's a situation that we got to get a handle on. I want to move over to this, the story in Turkey with this coup we've talked about many times on this show recently. It doesn't get really the attention it needs, and this Muslim cleric, Fethullah Gulen, who's being protected here. You can go to story after story in the European newspapers and European outlets explaining who this man really is. And I find it quite strange that the United States government is protecting this man when he's supposedly a caliphate organizer. He's using 150 schools in this country at a tune of $150 million a year as charter schools to basically, I believe, train people to create this Sharia law in this country and to bolster the caliphate. We are protecting this man. It gets very little attention, and I know you've looked into it. The Wall Street Journal recently did an article. Your thoughts on, what really upsets me is, why can't we go to the people in American schools in these inner cities? They don't have the choice, but apparently Muslims that are preaching caliphate do. Your thoughts on this guy?
Yeah, it's a situation that we've had in the past, and unfortunately it's stupid. It shouldn't be happening. It's a perversion of our First Amendment rights, the right to religion. In the past, we've seen foreign religious groups come into the U.S. and start to mainstream it, that is, start to take over various institutions and schools and things like that. Reverend Moon, for example, remember him?
Yeah.
He did the same thing. God only knows what he bought with his billions of dollars. The Washington Times, he bought schools, churches, everything. He was into everything. And under the guise of the First Amendment, Scientology's done the same thing. And this Gulen is just yet another one in a long list of claiming religion, mind you, to have some rather dubious goals. What the man's goals are, we don't really know. He's an Islamic extremist. He was partners with Erdogan. He was the Islamic extremist section of Erdogan's party. Gulen's the one responsible for Islamism in Turkey, which used to be secular. And now we see in the United States that Gulen's got his fingers into charter schools that are not just for Muslims. They're not charter schools for Muslims. They're charter schools that have been set up in various states to dupe Americans into going to them. We're not sure what the real reason is. The schools are all a dead giveaway because they teach Turkish, which nobody wants to learn, and they have Turkish teachers that they bring in. But otherwise, they have compliant curriculums. So again, what's going on there, I don't know, but we shouldn't allow it. Why should a foreign leader of a cult be allowed to come into the U.S., mainstream it into our schools? It ought to be investigated.
Right, and I know there's a man investigating it now. It might be nice to try to get a hold of him. You in fact gave me his name, and thanks for tipping me off on that article. But the point is, Erdogan, he asked the United States after he realized we were behind the coup, which is never reported here. He said, "Just send me Gulen, and we may get back to normalcy here." The United States won't send Gulen over there, because he's been outed as a CIA asset. And this is the real key to this story. He was brought over here in '99, protected by Bill Clinton right before Clinton left office. And he's still sitting in the Pocono Mountains. And I'm telling you, even Sybil Edmonds, the whistleblower, has outed him as a CIA asset. So I think their intentions are to bring in a guy like this, start teaching these extremist Muslim ideas like he did in Turkey, like he did in Norway, like he did in Sweden, like he did in many countries in Europe. And when it got too hot for him over there, we're protecting him. So what does that tell us about our government? Are we really on the side of Christianity here? What's your thoughts?
Well, the U.S. is not on the side of Christianity in the Middle East. And the fact is, we don't bring in Christian refugees. We bring in 99.5% of them are Muslim refugees, even though Christians are under threat of death in the Middle East. And there are Christians there who need to get out. U.S. doesn't allow them to come in.
Yeah, tell us that, because you're aware of some of the genocides that may be going on as we speak there against Christians.
Yeah, well, there is genocide going on, and this is an issue of mine. I'm a member of the International Criminal Court Bar, and I have asked that the International Criminal Court remove the prosecutor, a lady by the name of Fatou Bensouda, a Muslim from the Islamic Republic of Gambia. And what does Fatou Bensouda do? Well, she's supposed to prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity. Fatou Bensouda has never indicted ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram. They all get a free pass under the International Criminal Court. Instead, she goes after a guy who kicked over some Muslim headstones in Timbuktu. I'm not making it up. That's her big victory. Ooh, he pled guilty to vandalizing ancient Muslim graves. That's a war crime. Another Muslim did, but he'll get a slap on the wrist. But as far as the genocides that are going on against Christians and others in North Africa, in the Middle East, in Nigeria, by these terrorist groups, we don't hear a peep out of the International Criminal Court. And we don't hear anything from the U.S. government either. So,
and that could affect millions of people, right?
Well, it is. In fact, I'm heavily involved in Nigeria, and we get a lot of firsthand reports from there through work I do for the Christian groups there in the southeast of the country. There's 80 million Christians in Nigeria. And
wow.
The president, Buhari, is a Muslim. That, of course, is where Boko Haram is. That's affiliated with ISIS. It's an ISIS affiliate. And there has been a slow genocide against 80 million Christians there. I mean, you think we have a lot of refugees coming in from Syria? If a religious war breaks out there full scale in Nigeria, there'll be nothing compared to what comes out of there.
John, let's leave it there because we're all out of time. Let's pick it up there, though, next time on what's going on in Africa, the lost continent. We don't hear very little about it. I know you have a lot of information. John, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, we'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.